There is a quiet exhaustion that settles into the soul when you have spent too long trying to carry everything by yourself. It is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it feels like constant tension in your chest, a restless mind that never truly shuts off, or a deep tiredness that sleep cannot fix. You wake up already thinking about what needs to be decided, what could go wrong, what must be protected, what cannot be allowed to fall apart. You plan, you prepare, you anticipate, you worry. And even when things are calm on the surface, your heart remains alert, as if peace is something that must be guarded rather than received. This is the weariness of trying to control life, of believing that if you think far enough ahead, prepare enough, or hold on tightly enough, you can prevent pain, failure, or loss. You tell yourself that responsibility means vigilance, that strength means staying in control, that faith still requires you to manage every outcome, and so, you carry the weight of every decision, every possibility, every unknown future on your own shoulders. Over time, this constant effort quietly drains you, not because you are weak, but because you were never meant to live this way. Many people confuse control with safety. They believe that letting go means being careless, passive, or irresponsible. But what often hides beneath the need for control is fear. The fear of choosing wrong, the fear of losing what matters, the fear of not being enough, the fear of surrendering and being disappointed. So you keep leading yourself forward through anxiety instead of trust, through tension instead of peace. And slowly, almost without noticing, your soul becomes tired of always being on guard. The truth is, peace does not come from managing life more perfectly. It does not come from having every answer, every plan, or every backup option ready. Peace does not arrive when you finally figure everything out. Peace arrives when you recognize that you were never meant to figure everything out alone. There is a limit to how much the human heart can carry before it begins to ache under the weight of self-reliance. This is where a deeper truth begins to emerge. Real peace is not found by tightening your grip on life. It is found by loosening it. Peace does not come from controlling more. It comes from placing control into God's hands. Not as an act of defeat, but as an act of trust. Not because you stop caring, but because you finally acknowledge that there is a wisdom greater than your own guiding your path. When you allow yourself to be led rather than constantly leading, something shifts inside you. The pressure eases, the urgency softens. The need to have everything resolved right now begins to fade. You realize that you do not have to carry every outcome, protect every future, or solve every uncertainty. You are allowed to rest not because life has become easy, but because you are no longer carrying it alone. This introduction is not an invitation to give up. It is an invitation to breathe, to recognize that the exhaustion you feel is not a personal failure, but a signal that your soul is longing for alignment. And perhaps, beneath all the planning and protecting, what you are truly searching for is not control at all but peace. Peace does not disappear suddenly. It erodes slowly, quietly, as we take on more responsibility than our hearts were designed to carry. When we try to lead ourselves through life without surrender, without trust, without guidance beyond our own understanding, anxiety becomes a constant companion. Not because we are incapable, but because we are finite. The human mind can analyze, plan, and decide, but it was never meant to bear the full weight of uncertainty, consequence, and destiny alone. One of the first reasons peace fades is the fear of making mistakes. When you believe everything depends on your choices, every decision becomes heavy. You replay conversations before they happen. You revisit decisions long after they are made. You ask yourself endlessly whether you said the wrong thing, chose the wrong timing, or missed the right opportunity. Fear turns every step into a test, every crossroad into a threat, and under that pressure, peace cannot survive. Instead of moving forward with clarity, you move forward cautiously, anxiously, always bracing for regret. This fear does not come from irresponsibility, it comes from over-responsibility. You feel that if you choose incorrectly, the consequences will be irreversible. That one wrong decision could derail your entire future. And so you hesitate, you overthink, you delay. You seek certainty in places where certainty does not exist. The mind becomes trapped in loops of what if, and the heart becomes tense from carrying outcomes it cannot control. When fear leads, unrest follows. Another quiet thief of peace is the fear of loss. Loss of security, loss of relationships, loss of stability, loss of what you worked so hard to build. When you try to lead yourself, you often lead with preservation as the highest priority. You cling to what feels safe, even if it no longer aligns with who you are becoming. You stay in situations that drain you because leaving feels risky. You compromise your inner truth to maintain external peace, but what you gain in temporary safety, you lose in inner rest. Fear of loss makes you defensive. It keeps you scanning for threats rather than open to guidance. It teaches you to hold life tightly instead of receiving it freely. And the tighter you hold, the more fragile everything feels. Peace cannot coexist with constant guarding. A heart that is always protecting itself cannot fully rest. Then there is the fear of not being enough. This fear is subtle but deeply rooted. It whispers that if you don't try harder, plan better, or control more, you will fall behind. It convinces you that rest is laziness, surrender is weakness, and trust is naive. So you push yourself forward, not from confidence, but from insecurity. You measure your worth by outcomes. You equate effort with value. And when results don't match your effort, anxiety grows. This fear creates an internal pressure that never truly lifts. Even moments of success feel temporary, because you are already worried about maintaining them. Even moments of calm feel undeserved, because you believe you should be doing more. Peace becomes conditional, allowed only when everything is under control. And since life is never fully under control, peace remains just out of reach. Perhaps the most exhausting fear of all is the fear of choosing the wrong path. You want to live rightly. You want to align with purpose. You want to avoid regret. But when you believe you must figure out your entire future on your own, the weight of direction becomes overwhelming. Every option feels loaded with consequence. Every delay feels dangerous. Every closed door feels like personal failure. This fear creates urgency where there should be patience. It pushes you to rush decisions, not because you are ready, but because you are afraid of missing something. It makes you compare your timeline to others. It convinces you that falling behind is the same as failing. And under this constant pressure to get it right, your nervous system stays on high alert. Peace cannot enter a heart that is always racing against time. All of these fears share a common root: self-leadership driven by fear rather than trust. When you try to lead yourself without surrender, you unknowingly place yourself in the role of ultimate authority over outcomes you cannot fully predict or control. You become both navigator and protector, planner and judge, and that role is too heavy for the human soul. Leading yourself through fear will always produce unrest because fear narrows vision. It focuses on threats rather than possibilities. It prioritizes safety over truth. It resists uncertainty instead of learning from it. Fear-based leadership may keep you functioning, but it will not allow you to rest. Peace, by contrast, requires trust. Not blind optimism, but grounded trust. Trust that you are not walking alone. Trust that guidance exists beyond your limited perspective. Trust that even when the path is unclear, you are being held. Peace emerges when you no longer demand certainty before movement. When you allow yourself to be guided rather than driven by fear. This does not mean you stop thinking, planning, or making decisions. It means you stop doing these things from panic. It means you stop assuming that everything depends solely on you. It means recognizing that anxiety is not a sign you care deeply. It is often a sign you are carrying too much by yourself. When peace disappears, it is not because you are weak. It is because you are trying to be self-sufficient in a way that the soul was never designed to be. The soul was designed for relationship with God, with guidance, with something greater than personal control. And when that relationship is replaced with self-reliance fueled by fear, unrest becomes inevitable. The exhaustion you feel is not failure, it is feedback. It is your inner world signaling that fear has taken the lead where trust is meant to guide. Peace does not ask you to abandon responsibility. It asks you to release the illusion of total control. And perhaps the most compassionate realization of all is this: you do not need to know the entire path to walk it well. You do not need to guarantee outcomes to move forward faithfully. You do not need to be enough on your own to be carried forward. Peace begins returning the moment you stop leading yourself through fear and begin allowing yourself to be guided through trust. Many people expect God's guidance to arrive loudly, to come as a clear sign, a dramatic moment, or an unmistakable command that removes all doubt. They wait for certainty, for clarity so strong that fear disappears entirely. And when that kind of guidance does not appear, they assume God is silent, distant, or absent. But the truth is far quieter and far more intimate. God's guidance is rarely dramatic. It is subtle, steady, and deeply personal. It does not overwhelm you, it gently leads you. One of the most misunderstood forms of guidance is silence. Silence feels uncomfortable to the human mind because it leaves space for uncertainty. We want answers quickly. We want reassurance. We want confirmation. But silence does not mean abandonment. Silence is often where God is doing his deepest work. In silence, distractions fall away. In silence, your own voice quiets enough for discernment to develop. God uses silence to train your listening, not to test your worth. When everything external becomes quiet, you begin to notice what is happening internally. Your resistance, your attachments, your fears, and your true longings. Silence teaches patience. It teaches humility. It teaches trust without constant validation. God does not speak in silence because he has nothing to say. He speaks in silence because he is inviting you into deeper awareness. Guidance given too quickly can create dependence. Guidance that unfolds slowly builds discernment. Silence strengthens your spiritual senses so that when direction does come, you can recognize it without needing force. Another way God guides is through intuition, those gentle inner nudges that do not shout but persist. Intuition is not impulse. It is not fear. It is not emotional reaction. True intuition feels calm, steady, and quietly confident. It may not explain itself fully, but it carries a sense of rightness. You feel drawn towards something without panic. You feel resistant to something without anxiety. Intuition often speaks before logic catches up. Not because logic is wrong, but because logic works with limited information while intuition draws from deeper alignment. Learning to trust intuition requires slowing down. When your life is filled with urgency, intuition becomes harder to hear. Fear disguises itself as intuition. Anxiety mimics guidance. This is why peace is such an important indicator. God's guidance does not create inner chaos. It does not rush you into decisions out of panic. It does not pressure you to act before you are grounded. Even when God calls you into something unfamiliar, the invitation carries a quiet steadiness beneath the uncertainty. God also guides through closed and open doors, circumstances aligning or resisting in ways you cannot force. A closed door does not always mean no forever, but it often means not now or not this. When something consistently resists your efforts, drains your energy, or requires you to compromise your integrity, it may not be opposition, it may be protection. God closes doors not to frustrate you, but to redirect you. What feels like rejection may be divine redirection away from a path that would have cost you peace, purpose, or alignment. Open doors, by contrast, often come with a sense of flow. That does not mean they are easy or effortless, but they do not require you to abandon yourself to walk through them. The opportunity aligns with your values. The timing feels supported rather than forced. You feel challenged, but not fractured. Open doors often appear when you stop pushing and start paying attention. They reveal themselves, not through urgency, but through resonance. Inner peace is perhaps the clearest signal of God's guidance, yet it is also the one most often ignored. Peace does not mean the absence of fear, it means fear no longer leads. You may still feel nervous stepping into something new, but beneath that nervousness, there is calm. There is a sense of alignment. There is a feeling that even if the outcome is uncertain, the direction is right. This kind of peace does not depend on logic. It is not created by guarantees. It is experienced as inner permission to move forward without panic. God often speaks through peace, not urgency. Urgency pressures. Peace invites. Urgency demands immediate action. Peace allows space. Urgency creates fear of missing out. Peace creates trust in timing. When you feel rushed, anxious, or desperate to decide, it is often a sign that fear is speaking louder than guidance. God's voice does not compete with panic. It waits until your heart is calm enough to hear it. This is why learning to recognize God's guidance requires unlearning the habit of urgency. Many people move quickly not because they are aligned, but because they are afraid of waiting. They equate delay with failure. But guidance unfolds best in stillness. When you allow yourself to slow down, you begin to notice patterns. You see how certain options energize you while others deplete you. You recognize where peace remains, even when clarity is incomplete. Recognizing God's guidance is less about decoding signs and more about cultivating sensitivity. It is about paying attention to what brings you closer to peace rather than further into anxiety. It is about noticing where your spirit expands rather than contracts. It is about honoring the quiet yes and the gentle no, even when they do not come with explanations. This kind of discernment grows with practice. The more you listen without forcing, the clearer guidance becomes. The more you trust peace over panic, the more confidently you move. The more you release urgency, the more naturally alignment reveals itself. God does not lead you through fear, confusion, or exhaustion. He leads you through clarity, even when that clarity is subtle. Guidance is not something you chase. It is something you notice. It shows up when you stop demanding certainty and start allowing trust. It becomes visible when you choose stillness over speed, faith over fear, peace over pressure. When you learn to recognize God's guidance, life does not become predictable, but it becomes grounded. You stop trying to force outcomes and begin responding to direction. You stop leading from anxiety and begin following with trust. And in that shift, peace begins to return, not because everything is resolved, but because you are no longer walking alone. God's voice has been guiding you all along, not through urgency, but through peace. Surrender is one of the most misunderstood spiritual acts. Many people hear the word and imagine defeat, passivity, or giving up on responsibility. They fear that surrender means losing control, becoming careless, or allowing life to happen without intention. But true surrender is none of these things. Surrender is not weakness, it is strength, refined by trust. It is the moment you stop fighting life with fear and begin walking with it in faith. At its core, surrender is a choice. Not a collapse, not resignation, not escape. It is the conscious decision to trust rather than panic, to listen rather than force, to move steadily rather than frantically. Surrender is what happens when you realize that exhausting yourself, trying to control everything, is not bravery, it is unsustainable. Strength is not found in tightening your grip, it is found in knowing when to release it. Choosing trust over fear does not mean pretending fear does not exist. Fear will still appear, especially when the future is uncertain. But surrender changes who leads. Instead of fear driving your decisions, trust becomes the foundation beneath them. You acknowledge the fear without obeying it. You stop letting anxiety dictate timing, direction, or worth. Trust says, I do not need to see the entire path to take the next step. Fear says, if I don't see everything, I'm not safe. Surrender chooses trust, not because the path is easy, but because you believe you are being guided. When you surrender, you stop measuring every decision by worst-case scenarios. You stop scanning the future for threats. You stop living as if one wrong step will ruin everything. You begin to understand that your life is not so fragile that it can be destroyed by a single imperfect choice. Trust softens urgency. It steadies the heart. It allows you to breathe again. Surrender also means choosing listening over forcing. Forcing is exhausting because it assumes resistance is a problem to be overcome rather than information to be understood. When you force outcomes, you override intuition. You ignore signals. You push through closed doors because you are afraid of waiting. You mistake persistence for alignment. But surrender teaches you to listen to circumstances, to intuition, to peace. Listening requires patience, humility, and courage. It asks you to slow down enough to notice what is unfolding rather than rushing to control it. Listening does not mean inactivity. It means responsiveness rather than reactivity. It means paying attention to how your body feels around certain choices. It means noticing where peace increases and where tension multiplies. It means honoring hesitation when it comes from wisdom, not fear. When you surrender, you stop shouting demands at life and begin hearing its guidance. And often, what you hear is gentler and wiser than what fear was shouting. Choosing listening over forcing also reshapes how you relate to God. Instead of approaching faith as a transaction, if I do this, then this should happen, you begin to approach it as relationship. You listen for direction, rather than trying to manipulate outcomes through effort alone. You allow timing to unfold instead of racing it. This shift creates space for guidance to emerge organically, without pressure. Another profound aspect of surrender is choosing steady steps over frantic movement. Frantic movement is fueled by urgency, comparison, and fear of falling behind. It keeps the nervous system in constant motion. It convinces you that stillness equals failure and waiting equals weakness. But frantic movement rarely leads to peace. It often leads to burnout, regret, and disconnection from inner truth. Steady steps, by contrast, are grounded. They are intentional. They move forward without rushing. When you surrender, you allow yourself to move at the pace of alignment rather than the pace of anxiety. You stop comparing your timeline to others. You stop panicking about milestones. You stop treating life like a race you are losing. You begin honoring rhythm over speed. Steady steps build resilience. They allow learning to integrate rather than overwhelm. They give space for reflection. They reduce self-betrayal, and most importantly, they create peace along the way, not just at some imagined destination. Surrender teaches you that peace is not something you earn by exhausting yourself. It is something you experience by walking in alignment. When you surrender, something remarkable happens. The burden lifts. Not because responsibility disappears, but because ownership shifts. You are no longer carrying outcomes that were never yours to control. You are no longer holding the weight of every possible future. You are no longer trying to be both human and divine. The shoulders relax. The breath deepens. The mind quiets. The heart softens. This lifting of burden does not make you careless. It makes you clearer. It does not make you passive. It makes you present. You still act. You still choose. You still commit. But you do so from grounded trust rather than frantic fear. You stop trying to prove yourself through constant effort. You stop measuring your worth by productivity. You stop punishing yourself for uncertainty. Surrender also reshapes how you experience challenges. When you are no longer resisting reality, challenges lose their power to overwhelm you. They become experiences rather than threats, lessons rather than punishments, opportunities for growth rather than evidence of failure. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What is being shaped in me?" This shift alone creates profound peace. It is important to understand that surrender is not a one-time event. It is a practice, a daily choice, a moment-by-moment return to trust when fear tries to reclaim control. Some days, surrender feels natural. Other days it feels difficult. But each time you choose it, you reinforce the truth that you are not alone in guiding your life. Surrender strengthens faith, because it aligns you with something greater than your own limited perspective. It acknowledges that while you are responsible for your choices, you are not responsible for controlling the entire outcome. It honors the mystery of life without fearing it. It allows God to lead where you cannot see. And over time, surrender becomes less frightening and more freeing. You begin to notice that life flows more smoothly when you stop fighting it. Decisions become clearer. Timing feels supported. Even when things don't go as planned, you trust that they are still unfolding with purpose. Peace becomes more consistent, not because life is perfect, but because your heart is no longer at war with uncertainty. Surrender is strength because it requires courage, the courage to trust without guarantees, to listen without rushing, to move without panic. It is the strength to lay down the illusion of control and pick up the reality of guidance. And when you surrender, truly surrender, the burden lifts. You stop carrying what was never meant to rest on your shoulders. You stop fighting what was meant to lead you. You stop exhausting yourself trying to be enough. In surrender, you do not lose yourself. You finally find peace. As you reach this point, it becomes clear that peace was never meant to be something you arrive at someday. After everything is resolved and every answer is known, peace is not a distant destination waiting at the end of the road. Peace is a state of alignment, something that begins the moment you stop resisting the path you are on and start trusting the guidance that has been carrying you all along. When your heart aligns with trust instead of fear, with listening instead of forcing, with faith instead of control, rest begins to return naturally. You do not need to see the entire journey to walk it well. So much of your exhaustion has come from trying to look too far ahead, from believing you must understand every turn before taking the next step. But life was never designed to be navigated all at once. You are only asked to take the step in front of you, the one that feels steady, honest, and grounded in peace. Clarity unfolds as you move, not before. And when you release the pressure to know everything now, your mind softens and your spirit finds room to breathe. You also do not need to be strong all the time. Strength, as you may be learning, is not endless effort or constant control. True strength is the willingness to trust when you feel tired, to rest when you feel overwhelmed, to admit that you were never meant to carry life alone. There is a quiet courage in allowing yourself to lean into guidance rather than pushing through fear. There is wisdom in choosing trust over tension, faith over panic, surrender over strain. When you stop resisting the path, when you stop fighting uncertainty, stop forcing outcomes, stop blaming yourself for not having all the answers, you begin to feel something shift. The weight on your shoulders eases, the urgency in your chest softens, the noise in your mind grows quieter. You realize that peace does not come from fixing everything. It comes from trusting that you are being led, even when the way forward feels gentle and slow. This is the kind of peace that does not depend on circumstances being perfect. It remains even when questions are unanswered, even when outcomes are still unfolding. It is the peace of knowing you are not lost, not late, not failing, but walking exactly where you need to be. It is the peace that comes from alignment rather than achievement, from faith rather than certainty. As you move forward from here, allow yourself to walk more softly with life. Allow yourself to listen more than you push. Allow yourself to rest without guilt. The path does not require constant effort, it requires presence. And the guidance you seek does not shout, it whispers, gently, through peace. If this message has brought you calm, clarity, or reassurance, I invite you to help it reach others who may be carrying the same quiet weariness. Like this video to support the message. Share it with someone who needs permission to rest and trust again. And subscribe to the channel so we can continue walking this healing journey together. And as you carry this message with you, remember this truth: and return to it whenever your heart feels tired. When you allow God to lead the way, your heart finally learns how to rest.